Hey guys, HardlyBriefDan here with episode 44 of the Unity Make an RPG series. Today we're going to work on the battle calculations and doing them and how to set it up, or at least how I would set them up. Last time we worked on getting the actual player move choice implemented in the game. There's two things I want to talk about. First, sorry for the delay in videos. I work a full-time job, so sometimes I work a 13, 14-hour day. I can't make it here to make a video. I'm too tired. I got other things going on as well, so apologize for that. Last time we worked on creating the way the player does input, and I also asked you guys if you wanted to use Unity 4.6. I have switched over to Unity 4.6, so go ahead and download that when you get a chance. I am not going to be using Unity 4.6 GUI or anything just yet, but I am in a 4.6 beta. I'll put a link in the description below that you guys can use to download, and that's about it. Those are the two things I want to talk about, the fact that the delay in videos again, and that I have switched over to Unity 4.6. To kind of do a quick review of what we did last time, you see we are choosing who goes first, either the player or the enemy, and then we are allowing us to have our choices. So here I only have two abilities that I've created. I showed you guys how to create a for loop to make more, and here, when I go ahead and click it, you can see that we actually changed state, right? We changed state to a calculate damage state. You might see this calculating damage output here, and that's just because I added it a little earlier. I was playing around in the program. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to do is in our scripts folder, we're going to create a new folder, and it's going to be called Battle Calculations. Like this, calculations. You can see that down. Now it's up here. We're going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this we're actually going to call it Battle Calculations. Calculations, like that. Go ahead and open that up in Mono Develop, and what we're going to do now is you can go ahead and get rid of model behavior. We don't need that. We don't need the void or on start, like that. So we're going to jump into the turn-based combat state machine here. And in this, we're actually going to create a public static function, and we're going to call this used ability. So it's going to be a type base ability, and it's going to be called, we'll say player used ability, just in case we need something else. And what this is going to what we're going to do is actually set this variable here, this player used ability, in our battle GUI. So in our battle calculations, we actually want to create a function. It's going to be of public type, or it's going to be public, and it's going to be of type. It's going to return nothing, so it'll be void. And the name of it was, we're going to say calculate move used. We'll say used player move ability damage. How about that? That sounds pretty good. So calculate used player ability damage. So this is going to calculate how much damage we do from the player. So if you want different formulas and stuff for your enemy and stuff, you can do that. And this is going to actually take a base ability, and we're going to call it used ability. And so this is going to allow us to see what's in the ability that the player used. So if there's a cooldown, if there's a special effect, we can see that because we're passing the ability to it. And this is actually where that public static function or public static variable we created is going to come into. So what we're going to do is below this battle state start. Let me zoom in for you guys. Apologize. This is the battle calculation script I worked on. So you can see it here. We have a public void calculate used player ability damage, and it takes a base ability, and we're calling it used ability. So once you have that, go back into the turn-based battle script. Under this private battle state start battle script here, where we create a new instance of that, we're going to actually do that again, but we're going to do that with the battle calculations. So you're going to go ahead and do private. It's going to be of type battle calculations, and we're going to call it battle calc script. Okay, and we're going to set the equal to a new instance of it. And then now we can go ahead and call the function using this battle calc script variable. So in player choice, we're going to go ahead and do battle calc script dot calculate used player ability damage, and it's going to take a variable, and this variable is just going to be used ability. Player used ability, right? Like that. Why is it? Okay. There we go. What is wrong with this? Oh, it's called, oh, see, look, I messed up. Okay, there we go. So it's gonna be battlecalc state, battlecalc script dot calculate used player ability damage, and then we're gonna pass it player used ability. Now, player used ability right now doesn't have any, it doesn't have anything in it, and so what we're gonna do is in our battle GUI, that's where we're gonna go ahead and set it. So when the player presses one of those buttons, let's say it's the first one here, this is the first ability move, so we're actually going to go ahead and send it player move 1. And what you do is we're going to use the used ability, which is in our turn-based battle state machine. So you're going to go ahead and do turn-based battle combat state machine dot player used ability is going to be equal to, so the equal sign, our game information dot player move 1, and that's it, right? So use your semicolon here, and I'm actually going to move this below okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the move first, and then we're going to change our state, right? So now when I go ahead and press play and I press this player 1 move, you should see we can actually create in the battle state here, we can go ahead and create a little debug statement that says the name. So go ahead and do debug log, and then in parentheses we're going to go ahead and do used ability colon, and then another quote, and then a plus, and then we'll go used ability dot name, ability name, and this will allow us to see which ability we're actually sending it, and this is actually capital L, right? So this is just for testing, you don't need this, right? But we want to see if we're actually passing everything correctly. So what should happen is when we choose our move, we're going to go ahead and jump in, we're going to choose our move. Player used ability is going to be called player choice. We actually want this to be in our calculate damage, like that, right? So in our player choice, this is where we're going to choose what's happening, where our move is going to be, and then once we choose it, we're going to jump down to calculate damage. In calculate damage, we're going to go ahead and pass the move that we used, calculate the damage, and then return it, and then apply it. And then we're going to be using the status effects here as well in the middle of our calculate damage, but we'll get onto that later. First, I just want to show you guys that us passing this variable and stuff should work fine, and you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and clear these. I'm going to go ahead and press play. You remember I'm in a test scene right now with our, on the camera we have a battle GUI and our turn-based state machine attached to it. So this is like basically a battle scene. So say you were in Pokemon game and you randomly came into a counter. This is like the encounter screen. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. You see we're in player choice. I'm going to go ahead and hit normal attack and then pause. And you can actually see that the used ability here is our normal attack. So we're passing correctly. And I'm going to show you that we can go ahead and go back into our turn-based combat, in our battle GUI. And we're going to copy and paste this player used ability line of code here. And we're going to apply it right under player move 2 so that we can actually practice doing, or so that we can swap back and forth. So you can see that your player move 2 works and player move 1 works as well. And what I'm going to do is after we go ahead and display this function, we're actually going to go back to a different state. So and this is just for testing. So we're going to go ahead and do, after we say the building name, we're going to go turn-based combat state machine dot current state is going to be, dot current state, dot current state is going to be equal to turn-based combat state machine dot battle states dot player choice. Now again, this is just so that we can so I can show you that both abilities are passing through correctly. So I'm going to clear everything. I'm just going to set clear on play so it clears all the messages when we hit play. We're in player choice now. I'm going to hit /, and it's going to swap it real fast. Let's see if I actually worked. There you go. You can see that I hit /, it calculated the damage, and it dropped us straight back into our player choice again. So basically what just happened is the damage was applied, and then it exited back out to a player choice. So I'm going to go ahead and press, we're still in the game. I'm going to go ahead and press play again. I'm going to hit normal attack and then pause it. You could probably see maybe it popped up real fast because we're changing states really quickly. But here it is in the console here that usability normal attack was used. So we know we're passing correctly. I can go ahead and get rid of this line of code here, and we'll keep the usability so we know what we're using. And now we can go ahead and calculate or kind of talk about how we're going to be doing damage. So in that spreadsheet I made a while ago, I talked about how, what our damage would be. And basically damage is going to come from stats. So we have we have move damage, which is just the base damage. We have, just use it all here. We have move damage, we have critical strike damage. So when we crit, we have damage. We have, let's see, move damage, crit damage. We have armor, was it armor not penetration, but it's basically armor reduction. We'll say armor. We'll say minus armor. So basically, it's we got to take into account the armor they have. So move damage, critical strike damage, armor, and then stats. So basically, our stat modifier here. And then weapon damage. I think that was one. Right. So we have weapon damage here. So basically what we need to do is start kind of creating little functions and stuff for this. We'll also have another modifier here, would be a status effect. And what my plan is for now is to, once we use the ability, we actually might go ahead and try to add, we might flip-flop between add status effect. So from player choice, we might do the move, we might calculate the damage and then try to add the status effect, and then if the status effect does add, then use that damage and then go back to calculate damage. So maybe to explain that, I'll write a comment here. Maybe you guys can see it and understand it better. So basically the idea is we're going to use a move, use an ability. We'll say use an ability, right? And then we're going to go ahead and calculate damage. And then we're going to check status effect, right? Status effect. So what this means is if we have a status effect, if the move has a status effect, then we're going to go ahead and say try to add it. Try to add effect. Maybe your move has status effect, but it only applies every 50% of the time. Then this is where we're going to try to add it. So it might be not. It might try to add might be 100% of the time, but we don't know. So we're going to say try to add the effect. And then we'll have another if statement here and say if effect is added, then apply damage from effect, right? From effect. And then so after we do that, then we'll say calculate. It's going to be shift tab. We'll go ahead and say calculate total damage. Damage from status we'll say calculate total with status effect in mind. So basically what we're going to do is check for a status effect, and this is going to be if the move has a status effect, it's going to try to apply it. If it doesn't have a status effect, it will ignore it. And this is kind of where you can get really into the gut and feel of your game. And what I mean by that is, let's say you can just add logic here to kind of change the way the game plays. So let's say you can only have one status effect at a time. Then what you can do is here add another check. You can say check player or check enemy for status effect. If status effect doesn't exist, then go ahead and check to see if the move has a status effect, right? And you can kind of play around with that. Maybe you want stacking status effects. Maybe you want them all to kind of group up. This is where your interaction, this is where your personal design is going to come into play, right? And I can't show you all that logic because it's your design, it's your idea, and I don't know what your ideas are. So this is where you can kind of play around and add a few things. But this is like the basic concept of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be using ability. We're going to get the ability damage. We're going to take effect in all these stats and stuff. We're going to calculate that damage, and then we're going to check for a status effect. We're going to say all the stats, all the effects can stack for now. And then we're going to say if the move has a status effect, then we're going to try to apply it. If it applies 100% of the time, then it will be added, and then we'll go ahead and add that damage to our total calculated damage. We don't have to flip-flop states, and by meaning flip-flop, basically we're going to be doing calculate damage state, going back into a status effect state, and then jumping back into calculate damage. You could just do status effect and then jump into calculate damage. It's up to you. I might change that, but for now we're just going to go ahead and do calculate damage and status effect and go back to calculate damage. Okay, so now what we need to do is let's look at this first one, which is move damage. We're going to go ahead and do a private function down here, and it's going to return nothing for now, and we're going to say calculate move, or excuse me, ability damage. And so what this is going to do is in Unity, I'll go ahead and load up our let's say our attack ability, or a base, attack ability. You can see that we have this ability power, and this ability power is basically what I'm calling like a base modifier, right? So let's say that at level 1, basically this will do 10 of damage, let's say, or 10 times some modifier. You know, it's up to you. But this is going to basically do 10 something, 10 times something, 10 something. And this is what we're going to calculate from our ability. And so what we want to look at for now is, let's say for our battle damage, we're going to go ahead and capture that ability power. So we're going to create a private variable up here. So private int ability power is what we'll call it. And we're going to go private. We'll create a float for now, and we're going to call this ability total ability power damage. So basically, ability power is going to be the variable that we grab from our used ability, and then total ability power damage is going to be whatever we calculate down here, and this is actually what this function will probably return. But for now, we're going to go ahead and say, all right, we want the used ability power, so we're going to go ahead and pass this function a used ability. So we're going to go base ability, used ability, ability, like that. Same like we did above. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to copy that and paste it. We're going to say used ability dot ability power, or excuse me, it's actually going to be ability power is equal to used ability dot ability power, like that. And we're going to say this retrieves, that's wrong, isn't it? Retrieves, I think it's IE. Yeah, retrieves power of move. So depending on the move that's used, the power is going to change. So if you have a really strong attack, you'll see it here. So we'll do that, and then we'll say total. I think we're going to go ahead and return a float. So instead of void, we're going to say float, and we'll say total, or return total ability power damage, like that. So now here under this, we'll create another. Actually, we'll go up. Create another private int. It's going to be, and we're going to say total ability total. I'm trying to think. Total ability damage. Used ability damage. There we go. That sounds good. Total used ability damage. So under this move damage, we'll go ahead and do total used ability damage is going to be equal to, just for now, our float here, which we're going to have to cast as an int, but then we'll go calculate damage, ability, and pass used ability, like that. So what this is going to do, it's going to calculate, find out what this is, and we're going to apply it, and then we're going to go ahead and return it, or display it. So we'll go debug.log, and we're going to go ahead and say total used ability damage. So when this happens, we should see 10 for this first time. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and use a log error. So this, I think, let me look. Debug dot, I think maybe it's break. We can actually break the game and have it stop. I think it's debug break. And this is what we want. We want the game to pause as soon as we display this so we can see it. Let's see, why is that doing an error? Alright, we're going to go ahead and do debug log exception. And this exception is just going to be used ability damage. Right? So what we're doing, we'll see a big red line, red exclamation point say, hey, we got an error, but it's going to be our total damage. Hopefully. We got an error. What's this? Log exception. Oh, it takes a type. All right. What was it log? I thought break worked. We'll just do debug log then, and we already do that. I don't remember what I thought debug.break would stop it, but I don't know what does that now. Anyways, so we're gonna go ahead and do normal attack. We should see. Oh, it said 0, so we know there's an issue here. We can go ahead and figure out why. We were passing it. It sees that it's normal attack, but you know our damage here is 0 for some reason. Let's see why. Maybe usability name. Ability power should be. Oh, it's called normal attack. Where's our normal attack? Attack ability, yeah. It should be ability power is 10. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's see. Okay, well, what we can do is go ahead and look at this and do a debug.log. This is good practice, and we'll go ability power since we have it. Control S to save. Let's see if it actually outputs 10, and we can see where it's getting lost. Yep, and so it actually did output 10 here. So basically it's the conversion here, I think, of us converting it to a float is having it delete itself, maybe? I don't know. Gotta figure that out. Normal attack. Huh. What if we make this a int for now? Make that an int. Oh! Total used ability damage. I am not setting it. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm going to go ahead and make this a float again. My apologies, guys. So go ahead and do float. So basically I get the ability power, but I don't actually set it. So total ability power damage is going to be equal to ability power for now. Like that. There we go. Then we're going to go ahead and return it. And then we're going to go ahead and say ability. Total used ability damage is going to be whatever it gets returned out of here. There we go. Okay. Go ahead and press play, do normal attack. 10-10, so now it's passing correctly. And just to kind of explain what I did here is I just forgot to set the ability power equal to that. But this is actually where the damage calculation comes into. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we're going to grab a few things and kind of manipulate what this used power is. There's a couple things we can do. We can say, hey, what's our main stat, and then kind of use that ability. I'm going to go ahead and open up our game information script here. And if I can find it, where's it at? Game information. And if you remember, right now we're not calculating all of our, all of our stats, but we have a few things that we can look at. We have our class here that we can go ahead and look at and see what our main stat is for that class, and then we can go ahead and apply the modifier to it. We can just look at our stat and say this is what it's going to be. So what we're going to do is create another private function. I'm actually going to open up stat calculations first. So here we see what we would like to do is kind of find out in our stat calculations, do all the stat stuff and just retrieve it, right? Retrieve it for our battle calculations. We don't want to have to redo all the stat calculations, right? So let's say we want our main stat from our character. We want to use that as a multiplier of our ability damage, right? So what we can do is we're going to create a new instance of that stat calculation script, and so we'll go private. It's going to be of type stat calculations. We're going to call it stat calc script, right? And then we're going to set equal to a new instance of it, like that. And what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and create a function in our stat calculations that retrieves our main stat. So basically, it looks at what our main stat is, and then it's going to say what it is, and then send it to our player. Stat modifier. Let's see. Actually, what we can do. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and create a new public function in here, and we're going to say void, and we're going to look find player main stat. And what this is going to do is, what we want to do is say, hey, down here, find main stat and use it as a modifier for damage. So in our stat calculations, we want to find the main stat and then modify it how we want. You could just pull the stat and say, hey, what is our main stat? Set that equal to it, and you can actually do that in battle calculations. But if you do it in stat calculations, you can actually change the way you modify that stat. And what I mean by that is that we could say if player dot let's say, or it's game information. If game information dot player class dot main, I think we have a main stat. Main stat is equal to something. So if it's equal to bonuses, let's say if it's equal to stamina, I guess it is. So main stat, yeah, it's that's cool. I found it like that. Base character class main stat bonuses, right? Was that enumeration we made a while ago? So if it's one of these, so if it's endurance, intellect, let's say I don't know what class we are right now, but if our main stat is going to be intellect, right? Then we can go ahead and modify that here. So this is kind of cool. So now we're looking to say, all right, we're saying if our main stat is intellect, then we can get our intellect, whatever it is, so we can go ahead and calculate that stat up here, and then we can modify it how we want, and then send it back to our battle calculation script. So you could really fine-tune the way you do these stats, and then flip-flopping them between the battle calculations and stat calculations. Hopefully you get what I'm saying here. But basically we have our stat available to us. We know it's going to be, I think, like 10 is what we set the game information to. So, or what is a mage? A mage starts at 12. Let's look. Let's assume we're a mage, okay, for now. Let me find it. Base classes here. Our mage is... Oh, I didn't write them down. Base class. That's why. Okay, so base class. Where's our base character class here? We start at 8 intellect. Okay, so if we start at 8 intellect, we know down here we're gonna have 8 intellect, 8 int at 1, right, at level 1. So now we can say, well, do we want to just multiply it, so 8 times the damage, or do we want to say like 50% of our main stat and then 25% of our secondary stat kind of thing? And that's what I'm trying to get at, what you can play. So let's say if our main stat here is intellect, we want to go ahead and modify our main stat by 50%. So we'll go create another private variable up here. We'll say private int or float, I guess it would be int main stat modifier, and we're gonna go ahead and set the equal just to 0.05, so that's 50%, right? And the F because for float. Now what we can do is say, since we know our main stat is int, we can go game information dot since we know it's intellect here, we can go game information. We're going to want to return this, I think. So we're going to go ahead and return an int, right? And we're going to go down here and say return typecast an int of game information dot intellect, and then we're going to go ahead and multiply that by our stat mod, our main stat mod, which it's not, IntelliSense isn't finding it, but I'm going to go ahead and copy that up here and paste it down here. Like that. So what this is doing, again, you can get as fancy and as you want, but basically what we're doing right now is we're saying half of our intellect is going to be what we're going to return as our find player main stat, and so we're returning an integer, which this isn't exactly, this is not a good description of what this function's doing. We are finding the main stat, but we're also modifying it. So we're going to say find player main stat. We'll add to it and say and calculate main stat modifier. try to, I think it's good to be really precise with these function names. It's pretty long, but, whatever. It's fine. So what we're going to do now is, since this is in our stat calculations, we can go to our battle calculations up here and say, for our total ability damage, we want to go ahead and call that function, right? So we want to multiply our ability power and say, where do we go? We want to do stat calc script times our new find player main stat and calculate main stat modifier. Lots to say, but basically what this is going to do, it's returning an integer here, and this integer is going to be multiplied by ability power, and then we're going to go ahead and return it. And it's returning as a float, so this doesn't, you can return a float from here. So if you don't want any rounding errors, or if you only want to minimize your rounding errors, you might want to do that. And what I mean by that is, if we go into stat calculations, we can say let's return a float here. We don't need to typecast this thing as an int. So like that. So basically, whatever this, let's say your main stat intellect here was like 73, and your modifier was 33%. It's going to return a float. And so if you don't want to round that just yet, you can round it later. Maybe you don't want to round it at all. It's up to you if you want to have decimal damage. But basically, what we're doing here is I'm showing you a real simple way of kind of adding some more depth to your stats and your battle calculations. So what we're doing here is we're just going to have whatever our main stat is, we're going to multiply our ability damage by half of our main stat. That's what's happening. That's what I'm showing you guys, if you haven't been able to follow along too well. So our stat it doesn't take anything, so we're going to call this function. Our main stat's going to be intellect, and we're going to go ahead and apply the ability power, or multiply our ability power by that main stat modifier, and then go ahead and send it out. Now we'll probably run into a problem where we don't actually have a class. What is this? Oh. So if this doesn't return true, we're just going to go ahead and return a 1.0f. So what's most likely going to happen, and that's because we don't have a saved file where game information can get its information from, there's not a assigned class yet, it's probably just going to return a 1, which will mean 10 for our total used ability damage. But I'm going to go ahead and press play, and I'll go ahead and do normal attack, and you can see that we get this reference. And this is because this does not exist, right? So it should, if it's getting stuck there. I don't know why. Well, anyway, our player class means that it doesn't exist. We don't have a player class. So what we'll do is when we do our battle start, where are we at? Battle state start. We're going to go ahead and do in our player vitals here, we're going to go ahead and set our player game information dot player class is going to be equal to a new base character class, a new mage class. Okay, so basically we know that our main set should be intellect, and that should work. Let's see. Yep. Okay, so it did work. We got 0 for our total used ability damage, and that's probably because something went wrong with our calculation. So we'll go ahead and figure that out. Let's say total used ability here. Let's go look and see what this function is actually returning. So in our stat calculations, we can kind of go ahead and look at it. We'll go debug.log game information, not game, we want to do debug.log it should be game information.intellect. This might actually be 0. Again, this is all because we don't have a save file, so it's going to create a whole bunch of little errors right now. That's what I'm going to work through, and we can kind of figure it out, so you guys can go ahead and test. And that's kind of what I thought was happening. Let's see, it should be right here, right? Yep. So game information.intellect is set at 0 right now, and that's probably because in our here is where in our start is where we actually set it originally, I think. Stat calculations. I don't think we're actually Okay, so what we need to do is, now that we have this class, we're going to go ahead and set all of our stats. So this is a lot of work. I'm just going to go ahead and do one of them. Game information dot stamina is going to be equal to our player class is going to be equal to our game information. Oh my goodness. Dot stamina is going to be equal to our game information dot player class dot stamina, right? No dot intellect. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and change that to intellect. So let me explain again what's happening. As I've mentioned several times now, we don't have a save file that we're reading all this game information from, right? So what would initially happen is when you hit play and you're loaded into the game, all these stat values will actually be already in your game information script. But since we're just working on the combat system and not doing the loading right now, we don't have any stats to work off from. So we're creating we're just using a couple lines of code here just to test that out. And maybe, that's my fault. I should have kind of worked with the loading and stuff maybe beforehand. But I know a lot of you guys wanted to see what how I would handle a battle, a turn-based game would be. And so I'm going to go ahead and just right now I'm setting our intellect value from our game information player class that we just established here. Okay. So now we know our main stat is, and this should hopefully work. Go ahead and press clear. I'm going to play, get normal attack, and you see we got 40. So what happened? Let's look at it actually. That seems wrong, right? Oh, it halved it. Okay, no, that worked. Well, isn't ability, let's see, our used ability with normal attack should be 50, I thought. No, it's 10. Okay, yeah. Oh, I'm wrong. So our intellect here is 8, right? Our intellect stat right now is 8, and we're going to have it, and then we're going to calculate our ability damage from it. So it's working. Now it's working. Now that we actually have that and stuff, we can actually go ahead and I'm going to grab another stat just to show you how you can really change it up and do some more with it. And then you guys can play around, and I'll probably end the video after there because we're about at 40 minutes now. But basically what I'm going to go ahead and do is grab another game information dot, we'll say, let's look at our stats. We got endurance, strength, intellect, overpower. I think strength should play a role, but since it's not our main stat, we'll go ahead and not make it our main stat. Game information dot player class dot strength. And you know what we'll do? This is be better. Let's look at our mage class here. Our second bonus stat is actually endurance. So what we'll do is, instead of grabbing strength, we're going to go ahead and grab endurance, and we'll say 25%, or let's say 20% of your endurance is also calculated in your ability move damage, right? So, maybe you don't want to do that, but I thought that would be kind of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it here, just like we did in elect. I'm going to go into our stat calculations, and we're actually going to do another if statement. So if our main stat is intellect, and I'm going to do an and here, and because we know the class cases, we can get more specific. We'll say and our game information, oh my goodness, game information dot player class, right? Class dot second main stat is equal to base character class second stat bonuses dot endurance, right? So if it's equal to that and we're intellect, so this is basically if we're a mage, and what we could do, this is just being super specific. You could actually say, because only the mage class right now has these stat bonuses like this. So if your classes are unique, you can actually just say if game information player class is equal to a mage, then you can do this. But since I don't remember, I don't have the stats right in front of me. I don't remember. We'll just be more specific, just as a catch-all, But basically, now we'll go ahead and say we want our secondary stat modifier. We're going to create another private float. So private float second main stat modifier is going to be equal to, let's say 0.02, so 0.2 f. Don't forget to get the f in C# for float. We're going to go ahead and do our intellect times our main stat modifier. We'll do a float temp. We'll say temp. Oh no, you know what? We'll just do a return. We're going to put this in parentheses here, like that, and we'll say plus game information dot intellect times our second main stat modifier. We'll go ahead and put this in parentheses just to be safe, like that. So what we're doing now is we're going to say, hey, we're going to get 50% of our intellect, and then we're going to get 20% of our intellect and multiply it. We're going to add it. So that's going to be actually 0.75, isn't it? Maybe we shouldn't do that. That's not that interesting, is it? Question comes into, oh no, this is endurance. Excuse me. That's what it is. There we go. I didn't mean to do intellect. So basically what we're saying is our intellect is going to be multiplied by our main stat modifier. Our endurance here is going to be multiplied by our second main stat modifier. So we're going to add, so this should return 4 plus whatever our endurance was, which is I think 2. So our damage is going to be pretty high. But that can be changed, and we have armor to mitigate it. So control is to save. I'm going to go ahead and press play, and we should see normal attack. Oh, let's look at our console, and you can see our damage went up 20 points, so it went up to 60. And so basically what we're doing is we're looking at intellect. We're saying let's get half of that, which is 4. We're going to add we're going to add 20% of 12, which I believe was our endurance, and we can check that by looking at our base character class. 10 was our endurance, so we're getting 20% of that, and we're going to add it to our 4, which 4 plus 2, 20% of 10 is 2, so we get 6, and then we're going to multiply it by our intellect, which is 6, or which our ability move damage, which was 10. So you do 6 times 10 is 60, and that's what we're getting here. So hopefully you kind of like where we're going with the damage. We got a lot more to do. We got to add critical strike, armor, and more stat modifiers and weapon damage and status effects. So we got a lot more to do, and that's what's going to be in the next videos. We're going to work on a status effect video, or we're going to work on status effects in the next video that should be out tomorrow, the 18th. This one will be out today, the 17th of September. So look forward to that. And again, we'll go ahead and do status effects next time. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you liked the video. As a reminder, we are moving to 4.6. I have already moved there, and I guess I'll talk to you guys next time. Please like, subscribe. You can follow me on Twitch, Twitter, or Facebook. Leave comments if you got any questions. If you don't like the way I'm doing the stats, you can go ahead and write your comments down below. I'll definitely read them and check out what you guys have to say. But until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.